University of Michigan researcher and professor Dan Klionsky is an expert in autophagy, studying how cells chew up and recycle pieces of themselves. But in academic circles, it's not just his research that's creating a buzz. It's the new methods of teaching science that Klionsky himself has embraced and is now helping to spread to other classes and universities. Christina Shockley takes us to class, and be forewarned, there will be a quiz.
Dr. Dan Klionsky is leading a crusade to bring the teaching profession into the 21st century.
If you went back in time 200 years, medicine didn't know about germs causing diseases. Dentistry didn't have anesthesia. If you walked into a classroom in the 1800s, what the teacher is doing is essentially the same. So unfortunately, there's been very little change in the teaching profession since Socrates.
Which might be appropriate, since most lectures might as well be in Greek.
Usually in my classes, I go to lecture and I sit and my brain kind of turns off and I just copy down blindly everything that's on the board. So I'm not actually reading for comprehension. I'm not actually listening per se to what the instructor is saying. I'm just, writing down, trying to cram everything that he said onto the page.
Not exactly a scintillating description of a college lecture, but it's what we all know, so it gets repeated. Even by a new young life sciences professor named Dan Klionsky.
Stachyose is just raffinose plus another galactose.
How did you start teaching?
So I began teaching introductory biology, and for the first 6 years I used a standard lecture format, partly because that's all I ever experienced as an undergraduate. And that worked fine in the sense that the students enjoyed it and I enjoyed it.
Well, it sounds like it was working well in many ways. What made you start thinking that you wanted to tweak it a little bit?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So there were two primary observations that made me think it wasn't working as well as I thought it was initially. One was comments from upper division instructors who would say, for example, Dan, students from your class and other introductory biology classes don't seem to know even fundamental topics. The other observation was from office hours. Students would come in to see me and say, for example, Dr. Klionsky, I don't understand this topic. I would go over it. And they would nod along as if they understood what I was saying. And they would say to me, oh, this is great, thank you, I really appreciate it, now I understand. And just to double check, I would ask them a quick question before they left. Oh, before you go, can you just explain to me what would happen in this situation? And they would look at me almost with a shocked expression. How can you expect me to know that? And I'm thinking, but we just went over it and you said, yes, yes, I understand. And I realized this was essentially what was happening in the classroom. I know the material, so I can explain it in a clear manner to the students. And in fact, I can explain it clearly enough that they understand what I'm saying, but that doesn't mean that they learned it.
Realizing that he, like most professors, had never been taught to teach, Dr. Klionsky started searching for resources and came upon a concept known as active learning, which places an emphasis on interaction and problem solving. There was only one problem.
A big stumbling block was how to get rid of lectures. If the carboxyl group of this one is oriented next to the amino group of this one. And after thinking about that for a while, I came up with a possibility.
That possibility evolved into the way Dan teaches class today. There are no midterms or final exams to cram for. Instead, students get all his lecture notes in advance. Each class starts with a quiz to make sure they're keeping up on the reading. Those quizzes are quickly scanned for relevant feedback. If a lot of students get a question wrong, that topic is instantly made a point of emphasis in that day's brief lecture. Then a majority of the class time is dedicated to interactive group problem solving, moderated by Dr. Klionsky.
Enzyme 1? Is that your final answer? Yes. Enzyme 1? Just as group was saying.
And finally, class ends with another quick quiz covering the concepts from the group discussions. The format might be a departure, but it's working for students.
I enjoyed coming to class, which is much more than I could say for many of the other classes that I've attended.
The questions that got asked in the discussions that we had were much more intelligent than in any of the other classes I had in college.
My retention increased dramatically. I mean, I still remember sitting in his class and having the discussions that we would have, and as opposed to the other classes where you just study and memorize for an exam.
Oftentimes, I feel like we're under the impression that we don't like something because of the way that it was taught. And then the way that he taught that class, helped me to gain interest in biology.
Dr. Klionsky's classroom innovations were recognized with the National Science Foundation Director's Award for Distinguished Teaching Scholars. The NSF grant is helping Dan spread the word about his teaching methods.
Tell me about the life sciences learning community.
The goal was to introduce junior faculty members to methods of active learning. One of the biggest problems, it turns out, in having people implement active learning is that they're doing it by themselves. There's no support network. And so we wanted to provide a support network where people could try an active learning approach and bring it back to the group and tell us about problems, or ahead of time, come up with ideas for how they might use active learning in their classroom.
People who are, totally staunchly resistant are gradually thinking they need to do these things. Through these learning communities, we have faculty that get together once a month during the school year, and over the summer we get five times. We have 5 sort of sessions to kind of get us ready for the fall semester, and we bring faculty together to talk about teaching and learning, and we really support each other because we're attempting new things in our classes, and we can come back to another group of faculty and say, what did you do and how did you solve this problem? It's almost like a class in teaching.
But that's what they've been taught in the biochemistry, so they test over it.
What is the best thing about active learning?
I think one of the best things is the difference in the interactions I'm getting with the students. As we look at the research on this, about 80% of, 60 to 80% of the students that go through science classes don't like them. And so there's a really big fallout. And I'm seeing students who come to us and say, I never liked biology. I like biology now. And to me, that's the most exciting.
With positive uptake by students, postdocs, and faculty at the University of Michigan and elsewhere, Dr. Klionsky's teaching methods are gaining steam, just in time to help students manage an information explosion.
We no longer want people who simply have memorized facts. We want people who know how to find the facts when they need them, but how to ask questions and solve problems. So really the focus is shifting from one of basic knowledge to one of thinking ability and solving problems.
Turns out there's another good reason to abandon the traditional lecture.
This is more fun because there's much more of a give and take with the students, and the class, 2 hours, my class is twice a week for 2 hours at a time, the 2 hours fly by.
When we get to the problem solving, you'll want to answer the problems with a really clever answer.